And yeah, all right, cool guys, we are live. Welcome everyone. Thank you again for joining in this hands-on sort of workshop. There's like I think I'm doing this after a very long time, and especially with a guest today. I think last time I did a workshop was on basics of C++ and kind of building a tic-tac-toe game, if I remember. That was like a hands-on thing that we did last time. So today, excited to have Ayush with us. Um, and Ayush, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself as well to the rest of everyone?
Hi everyone, I'm Ayush. I am a software engineer. I graduated from MITS Pilani in 2013. Then I joined Flipkart where I worked primarily on backend. I worked on the data platform team for about 2.5 years. Then I joined an early stage startup in Bangalore. It's called Play Shifu, where I worked as a full stack engineer, and there I picked up Node.js, I picked up Unity 3D, I worked on augmented reality games. Um, More recently, I have been a co-founder of a startup called Nirogyan. We make smart blood reports, um, and so we are based out of Gurgaon. Right now, however, I am in Kolkata. It's my hometown. I'm currently at my home, and AWS Lambda is something that has excited me ever since it was launched. I have been using Lambda for about 4.5 years now. I used it in Shifu, I used it in Nirogan, and um, yeah, I like using it.
Okay, cool. So why don't you give us a quick sort of just a very broad level what exactly AWS Lambda is, so that people are generally aware of it, and then we'll kind of dive in hands-on as well and get started.
Yeah, sure. So AWS Lambda is an example of a paradigm called serverless computing. Serverless computing is a very new term, and I would like to quickly describe, the history behind serverless. Um, so, cloud computing as such came about and let engineers not worry about, buying computers, buying servers. Before cloud computing, companies had to buy servers of their
Hmm.
own, set them up, have, ops engineers who could plug in all the wires and ensure that all the network ports and everything is working properly. Cloud computing came in and said, okay, fine, you don't have to worry about buying servers of your own. um, Stuff like Amazon Web Services, Oracle Cloud, um, Google Cloud. So these clouds came in and said, okay, you can just configure your server on from your web browser itself,
Hmm.
and you will get an IP, which is essentially your server's IP. So that allows companies to not worry about buying servers and simply configure all the server properties through their browser.
Mhm.
So it essentially made computing easy for developers across the world. So that was obviously one wave, and then we started moving in the direction of making it easier and easier and easier. So it was seen that a lot of developers don't really want to learn about how to configure the RAM and the disk space and the you know how the network ports behave on a server and all of those things. So because what happens is, if you want to make a very simple app, your app can simply work on a very basic server which is configured with some sensible defaults.
Hmm.
So if you have whatever 16 gigabytes RAM or a 64 gigabytes RAM and 5 GB of, or let's say whatever 100 GB of disk space, then that works pretty sensibly enough for a very common application. So what these clouds started doing is they started giving basic services which had these defaults configured. And what that led to is it led to removal of an ability to configure these parameters. Each server has lots of parameters you can configure: the amount of RAM, the amount of disk space, the amount of network ports you want to have, and all of those other things. So, like I said, they saw that a lot of these apps have some very sensible defaults that work, and they said, okay, fine. You don't have to worry about configuring these things. You just put in your code, and we will make sure that it works on a sensible server with sensible defaults. It gives you sensible scale. It runs fast enough, and it's good enough for the basic application that you're trying to build.
Yeah.
So that is essentially the idea of serverless. And why they call it serverless is because getting a server from AWS essentially meant, okay, you're getting a server and you have to configure it. But AWS Lambda said, okay, you don't have to configure anything. You just give me your code and I'll run it on a very sensible server that works with good defaults. So they used that idea and started calling it serverless.
Yeah.
And it's a good catchphrase, but it does not mean that it does not run on a server. It actually runs on a server.
Yeah.
But the idea is they want to market it well and want to make it catchy. So they give it the name serverless to attract developers and say that, okay, fine, you don't have to worry about configuring anything. You just give me your code. If it's in Node.js, if it's in Java, if it's in Python, or if it's in, there are some other languages also that they
Go.
have. And that's essentially what AWS Lambda is. And there are other clouds also that have this serverless platform.
Yeah. So when I joined DE Shaw in 2009, when I first visited the office, it was a 5-story building, right? Like 5 stories full of developers and techies and non-tech finance people. Second floor or first floor, I don't remember which floor. One floor was just a server room,
Wow.
like a huge freaking floor where usually you will have 200 to 300 people sit. That was just a glass wall and just like servers and servers and servers, right? I mean, like that's where the pure power of all of these cloud providers today, Amazon, Google, Microsoft Azure, comes in, where startups and companies don't have to worry about all this hardware. That is the problem, right? Like, let Google worry about it, let Amazon worry about it. And there was cooling, temperatures were maintained, there were hardware guys figuring out with the wires and all. Even like VPs of engineering weren't allowed to go in there, because if you accidentally go in there and f something up, the entire shit goes down, right? So it's such a simple concept and such a powerful and impactful way of building technology, right? And now it's moving in a direction where first it was like, all right, take a server, configure it yourself, and deploy your code and get it up. Now we've moved into these Lambda functions, and where you just give them code and you don't even worry about the server. The code runs when it needs to run, right? I wonder where this is heading, where it's like, all right, just tell us the definition of what you want to run. We'll build the application as well. We'll deploy it as well. We'll run it as well. You just change the design, and down the road it will be like, all right, just give us one statement of what an app you want, and we'll do everything for you, right? You don't need to worry about anything. So I think with AI and everything else, it's eventually moving in that direction where it's becoming much and much simpler. And in fact, not recently, 2 days back, Amazon launched Honeycomb or Honey something, right? Like their first no-code application builder, where you do not need to actually write a code to build an application. You just drag and drop elements and visual elements and all, etc. It just launched 2-3 days back. So again, it's moving in that direction where people don't need to do shit, and things just work. So that's the beauty of technology. But there is shit ton of technology that goes behind it in order to power those systems up, right? So it's exciting times. I think a lot of fun work left to do for Amazon, right? Yeah, Shikhar mentioned Amazon Honeycode. Yeah, Honeycode. So Honeycomb is what I remembered, but yeah, Honeycode. All right, cool, awesome. So without further ado, are you sure? Do you want to just go and screen share and just dive in?
Sure. Okay, I want to just quickly say that I have prepared two examples. One is a simple hello world sort of scenario. It's not very real. The other one is a simple API for in-app purchases, and we'll be covering just one flow in it. And the flow is, okay, if a user has whatever two out of five possible in-app purchases, then what are the suggestions for him to buy other in-app purchases? So that's one simple API I'll be looking at.
Sure.
So the first example we will look at is Lambda function that we'll create, a simple hello world Lambda function. So this is the AWS Lambda functions page, and you can see create function over here.
So I think Ayush, it might be important if somebody's created a new account and are or just like logged in, right? So where do you kind of navigate in order to get into the Lambda options menu or something, right?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry. So this is where you would log in after creating your AWS account, and I am looking at the Mumbai region over here. It's AP South 1. I think AWS Lambda is available across all the regions, but I'm looking at Mumbai right now. So if anyone is following along, they might want to configure it to Mumbai. And here you can find a whole bunch of AWS services. And I'm going to search for Lambda over here. Run code without thinking about servers. So this is where you would see all the different Lambda functions. You might not have any on your account yet, so it'll obviously show 0. I have some over here. This is where we're going to create a new Lambda function. And so to create a new Lambda function, you get 3 different options over here. Author from scratch, use a blueprint, browse the repository. I'm going to use author from scratch. It's a very simple hello world example. We can call this node.js hello world, and we can choose node.js 12 version 12.x over here. As you can see, there are lots of different languages over here. They have C#, they have Go, Java, Python, Ruby, and there is also something called custom runtime, which I think some advanced developers have used to create their own C++ or Haskell runtimes of their own favorite languages. So let me do Node.js, and the rest of it is sensible defaults. You can forget about it, and we'll do create function over here.
So any specific reason why we would choose like Mumbai or maybe not choose like a US region, like any kind of advantage, disadvantage of trying to see what region to choose, because there was a full list of regions, right?
Yeah, I think one basic thing to look at will be if the app that you're building has users in India, then it's a slightly better option to use Mumbai because the response time, the latency will be lower,
right?
Because the servers are in Mumbai. And if you have your users in the US, then you can use US. But if you have your users worldwide, then there are certain other things that Lambda provides, which there are things called Lambda at edge, and there are some other stuff which even I'm not aware of. But yeah, I mean, I have used Mumbai mostly.
Got it. Yeah, I think the
But
ideal preference is just think about where your users are going to be.
where your users are,
So yeah, so if your users are in a specific geographical region, then obviously it's better to host the Lambda function there, so it's closer to your users. As a result, they'll see shorter time, network time, and yeah.
exactly, yeah. So yeah, this is the Lambda function that they have written here. This is good enough to get started. You can already see a to do implement comment line over here. You can let
Hmm.
it be. Um, so here I'm gonna simply say test, and it asks me to create a new test event. You can call it whatever. You can call it event hello world. This
Okay.
is this is key one, value one. This is a JSON. We can let it be for now. That's fine.
Okay.
Let's do create. Okay. And now it will let me test. Okay, so this execution has obviously succeeded, and we can see the logs over here. We click on details, it shows the logs. So here is the response from the Lambda function. Each Lambda function takes in input. The input is called event, and each Lambda function also returns a response. So the input event for this particular test that I just now ran
Mm-hmm.
was this. So this Lambda function gets key1 value 1, key2 value 2, key3 value 3 JSON as an input, and because it does not do anything in the code, inside it simply says return status code 200 and hello from Lambda. So that's the response that a default Lambda function, hello world Lambda function gives out. So you can see the response over here. Obviously, it's what we would expect.
Hmm.
And there are some other things here, some summary as to how much time it took, and 128 MB was the RAM that was configured for this Lambda, and there's some other details that it gives out. Now let me quickly also show an example of a Lambda function in Python. We go back to functions, we create another function also from scratch, and let's call this, let's say, python hello world. It will work much the same way, but I just quickly wanted to give an example. Python 3.8 and create function.
I think it will be better if we just quickly cover the uh, the body of the function itself as well, just so that everybody following along can understand what exactly the body means, especially if they're either new to Python or JavaScript. Just covering what exactly it is doing by default, and then how we can go ahead and once we look at the second example that you mentioned regarding in-app purchase, it'll be easier to follow along for everybody.
Yeah, I'll do that. So this is obviously Python. For those of you who can read Python, um, this is what the default function simply does. It returns status code 200 and a JSON called hello from Lambda. Yeah, so like Mayank said, I'm going to go back to the JavaScript examples now. The rest of this session is on JavaScript, but obviously it works on any language you would want to work with. So Node.js hello world. Let's now do an example where we, let's say, change hello world and call it hello name. So whatever, let's say hello Ayush or hello Mayank or something like that. So for that, what we can do is hello plus event dot name. So the code here is now expecting that the input called event has a property called name, and that's the person we are going to say hello to. So here, let me create a new test event. Sorry. Let me create a new test event. We can call it uh, event hello name. It's just a name. You can give any name here.
Mm-hmm.
And here, instead of key value, key1, value 1, you can give name. And I'm going to give my name here. So this is the input JSON called event that the Lambda function will receive. And it has this key called name, whose value is Ayush. Let me create this test event. And every time you make changes to the code over here, this save button will become active. So you have to save it continuously. So I just saved this. And now I'm going to test this code with this new test event, which has this as the input event.
Okay.
And you can see here, the response is now hello Ayush instead of hello world. Similarly, you could simply change this event and give Mayank as the name, and it would behave the same way.
Yep.
So this is how you can use the input coming into a Lambda function. You can obviously instead of just one name, let's now create another example where, what if we send an array of names? What if you want to say hi to multiple people? If we do something like this, let me create a new event for this. Event hello array. If we test this instead of just one, let's see what happens. Okay, so it's put a comma over here, and the code works in the same way. So this happens because JavaScript automatically takes an array and prints all of the elements in the array by putting a comma. But in Java, for example, that might not happen.
Yep.
You might have to specifically, or in C++, you might have to specifically destructure this event.name as an array and then print each of its elements.
Yeah.
So in JavaScript it's slightly easy.
I think there's one important thing that it's good to mention here as well is uh, like everybody saw that within 10 minutes we were able to click a few buttons, modify an existing hello world function, and actually test it running in a server, right? Like a small piece of code that we wanted to run in a server, we are actually able to get it up and running in like what, less than 5-7 minutes. So, and that is where the power of Lambda functions is. We didn't have to worry about setting up a full server, installing the node application inside it, getting all the things configured correctly, getting the IP and all those things, right? Like, I mean, haven't started making an external call like a URL, but still, right? Like, the power is that you just are now dealing with code, right? Like 5 minutes, you have a function, it takes certain input that the user is going to provide or the user application is going to provide, you process that input, send the response back, right? So that is where the beauty of these Lambda functions kind of outshine typically the classical model of either buying a server or even leasing a hardware server from Amazon or other places. You don't have to worry about all that nonsense.
Yeah, that's right. To quickly add on to Mayank's point here, you can see that this particular Lambda function that we just created, by default, Amazon gave 128 MB of RAM to it. But if you as a developer decide, okay, your Lambda function has to do much more than something basic, you can quickly go down here and edit the basic settings here. And that is as simple as dragging this slider all the way up to whatever. It takes up to three gigabytes of RAM. So it's as easy as just doing this. I'm going to take it down to 128. And if you're wondering what happens to my cost when I take this up, yeah, the cost does go up, but Lambda has some free tier limits also.
Yeah.
So that's not a problem. Okay, so now I quickly wanted to show one error case. If let's say I misspell event over here, if I call it, let's say, event tt.name, let's see what happens. Just wanted to show an error case. So here you can see this box becomes red, and the result is whatever. It gives you the details. Event t is not defined.
Hmm.
So all of the stack trace you can see right here. Yeah. So this particular code, because we'll use it later, a few minutes later. So I'm going to change it back to hello world.
There is an interesting question in the YouTube channel. Does Lambda support Laravel? I actually don't know. Is it?
Support Laravel, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's quickly find out if it supports PHP. Runtime PHP. I can't find any PHP runtime here. Laravel is a PHP
Yeah.
framework for those who didn't know. So I can't find PHP here. But if you search for,
I'm guessing you'll have to provide your own, right?
yeah, you'll have to provide your own PHP runtime. But because they have this option, maybe some exciting developer somewhere in the world has already done that. And if he has made it open source and available for you, you could try importing his bootstrap here.
Most likely somewhere on GitHub there is an open source repository that provides all the information for this. So
definitely, because I've seen developers make runtimes for languages like Haskell and Scala and whatnot.
Right.
Because people want to use serverless, but if it's not available for their language, then they'll have to do this.
Yep.
Okay, nice. Now we'll create another Lambda function for the in-app purchases example. I'm going to call it IAP. We'll use Node.js as the default runtime. Create function. I had given out one file called iap-index.js, and that's the file that I'm also going to use now. So if any of you have it, and for those of you who are following along, what I'm going to do is I'll open that file and copy its contents completely and paste it into this code editor over here. Okay. So the use case here, as I had mentioned, is let's say you're making Fruit Ninja, and in Fruit Ninja you want to have 5 different in-app purchases options: Golden Blade, Star Fruit Pack, Gorgeous Pack, Glitter Pack, Golden Apples. So these are all the in-app purchases that you want to sell. And what we're going to do is we'll make an API where the input is which are the in-app purchases that are already purchased by this user. So out of the 5, the ones that the user already has, we'll suggest them the ones that he doesn't have. So for example, if the user already has Golden Blade and Starfruit Pack, then the suggestions will be the rest of the 3: Gorgeous Pack, Glitter Pack. Similarly, if he has only Gorgeous Pack, then the rest of the 4 comes out as the suggestion. So this Lambda function, as input, it gets which all in-app purchases are already purchased, and the response of the Lambda function should be the suggestions, which is essentially the difference of if you want to use set theory terminology, the difference. Okay, so we have to create the test events for this. Let me quickly create configure test events. User already has. I have 3 test events here to cover. I have 3 different possibilities to test here. So create new test event. Call this event test 1, and here I'm going to say already purchased, and then there is an array. So this talks about a user who has already purchased Golden Blade and Starfield Pack. And notice the key name of the JSON here. It's called already purchased. And in the Lambda function also, we have this. We are referring to event dot already purchased over here. So if your Lambda function was referring to something called event dot user already purchased, then the test event should also call it user already purchased. It should match essentially. If it doesn't match, then you'll get an error. Let me create the other two also very quickly. Test event 1, test event test 2. This user has only one for this pack, and another.
So I'm seeing a couple of questions regarding what is AWS Lambda, guys. So we covered that in detail in the opening sections. I think you guys might have joined in a little late. So just kind of go back in the YouTube history, and you'll be able to see basically. But in essence, it's the ability to run directly your code in the cloud in some sense without having to worry about managing a server yourself. So that is the power of what AWS Lambda is. Okay, so you can just directly give it code. As you can see, what Ayush is showcasing, we are directly going into our browser, editing code, and kind of running it in the cloud.
Yeah, so I have configured 3 different test events for these 3 cases here: IAP test event 1, test event 2, test event 3. Quickly gonna run this. So test event 1, let's test this. So you can see the results here. This user had he already had Golden Blade and Starfruit pack, and the other 3, which he didn't have, is coming out as a sponsor. So purchase suggestions, the rest of it. Similarly, if we run test event 2, this user had only one of them called Gorgeous Pack, and the output should be the rest of the 4. So here, as you can see, it works fine.
Can you quickly look at the code as well and understand how it is actually figuring this stuff out based on the input that we are getting in the event?
Yeah, sure. So this is JavaScript. This is Node.js. For those who know JavaScript, I have created a very simple function called purchase suggestions here. The input to the function is already purchased. It's an array, and what we do is we filter out those that are not already purchased. So as you can see, this not over here, and this array, this big array, contains 5 elements. These are all of the in-app purchases that your app has, and so from all, we are filtering out only the ones that are not already purchased.
Got it.
And yeah, so this is, I mean, this is some this is what some would call the functional style of writing code. If you're not aware of the functional way of writing code, you can obviously also do stuff like for whatever where I in items, and then pick the ones where the boolean not match and all that. So if you want to do it in the imperative style, you can obviously already also do do it using for loops.
So here I have an interesting observation here. So right now the thing is that the list of items that the application has is fixed, right? Like, okay, here is this 5 list of in-app purchases that it's going to check against, right? And say, okay, this user has this one item, let me give it 5 other. Or is this user has 10 items, let me give it the remaining left, right? Can we also make that list part of the input itself, so that the lambda function becomes generic in a way that I tell it both things. Here is the total list of in-app purchases that a user can possibly make. Here are the ones that he has already purchased. Can you suggest what all should it be? So that way tomorrow I can use the same kind of logic across maybe even multiple apps and games and whatnot, right? So it becomes generic layer of smartness, even though it's not really doing anything smart. It's just doing a negative, right? Like taking one set and subtracting another set and returning. But tomorrow I can make this function smart and use some fancy machine learning shit in here and say, all right, this is the input. User has these items. These are the total items. Out of these, let me return maybe one, which is like the most probable one that the user might buy, right? So
Yeah, depending on anything, like depending on his age or
exactly,
depending on his
age,
mode or
previous usage pattern, any other data as well, right? Like so,
that's right.
something, yeah. So
Let's quickly do that here, Mayank. Let me change this test event to add another field called all items.
hmm.
And one sec.
Yeah, we can just grab the entire array for now.
Yeah, I'll just copy this array very quickly and add it into the test event now instead of hard coding it inside the code. All items is an array, and it's this array. All right. Save.
I think the single code double code issue.
ओके हो जाएगा
Yeah.
हो जाएगा बहुत जल्दी हो जाएगा डोंट वरी गाइस हो जाएगा
Yeah, this is where I love Vim. Uh, I'm a hardcore Vim user, so
yeah same here okay so we named it all items and let me call it all items here also obviously. So now I'm changing this function which calculates the suggestions for a purchase, and instead of just one item it also takes the list of items as an input. So there are two inputs to this function now, and here instead of hard coding this I will change this to all items. So what this will obviously do is, what Mayank suggested, all of the items are also coming in from the, the input, and we are still doing the same thing. We are still filtering out only the ones that are not purchased, but instead of them hard-coded inside the Lambda function, we are actually taking it from the input. So let me add another item here. Whatever, we'll call it awesome blade.
I was calling it shiny banana, but sure. Okay.
All right.
Cool.
Let's save this, and hopefully this will give out 5 suggestions because there's one in the input already. And before this we were getting 4, but now we should get 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we're getting.
They got the shiny banana. Yeah. All right. Awesome.
So this is beautiful. So we can make Mayank suggested we can make this Lambda function generic, in which case, instead of this list of all items coming in from the input, you could also refer to a database. You could say, okay, all my items are not coming from the input, but I'm referring to my own database where I have all the purchases.
Right.
You could refer to a different file. You could call. You could do a whole bunch of things to get the list of all items. So, all right. So, shall we move on? Now, I want to show a way in which we can make this Lambda invocable from your browser. So, a network call essentially. For those of you who already know what an HTTP REST API is, you'll be able to follow along better. So AWS gives a way for you to invoke a Lambda from your browser using essentially an HTTP REST API, and there's a different service to configure that. You go back to, so if you click on AWS over here on the home logo, you'll go back to the home screen. And in Find Services, we will look for something called API Gateway. API Gateway helps us create APIs. Second. So here, I already have two APIs here, but you won't have any. We'll do create API first. And here we'll do REST API. Choose REST API. This is, as you can see here, develop a REST API where you gain control over the request and response. And it works with Lambda, it works with HTTP and other AWS services. So it works with Lambda, which is what we're interested in. Build using REST API. Okay. So here I think all the defaults are pretty sensible. You don't have to change anything here. API name, I'm going to call it, let's say, IAP-API. No jokes on anagrams, please. In-app purchases API. Just any description here, and the rest of it is fine. Create API. Okay. So here you can see a standard REST API space. In REST terminology, if you want to create an API and your API is deployed at whatever, let's say xyz.com, and then you want something like xyz.com/users or xyz.com/purchases or something. So whatever comes after the slash is called a resource. So we're going to create a new resource, and here also, I'll do two examples. One is the hello world, and then we'll do the IAP example. So let's first do the hello world. So the resource name is hello-world, and AWS automatically, fills in /hello world over here. If you want to change this, and if you, for some reason, want to, name it differently, you can do that. Hello world 1 as the actual parts, but hello world as the name. But we will stick with both of them being same. So hello-world, create resource, and let me also create /IAP as another resource. Now you can see this line hello world over here is selected. So if I select here, then this becomes blue, and if I select here, then this becomes blue. So this works sort of like Windows Explorer, if you know what I'm talking about. Now if I want /IAP, then I have to select this and do create resource over here.
Okay.
But if I want /hello world /IAP, then I'll have to select this and create new resource.
So basically kind of like you're nesting it inside it, right? If you are. Yeah.
Correct. So I don't want to nest IAP within hello world. I'll have it as a sibling. So I'll go back to / the root, and from here I'll create a new resource, and let me call it IAP. Everything else is cool. Okay, so we just defined two resources, but we don't have any HTTP methods on this. So we will do a get create. So we select hello world over here, and on actions do create method. Okay, here you can see these different HTTP methods. Let me select get, and there is a tick here. Okay, cool. Now I have to set up the get for hello world. I'm going to do it after 2 minutes. Let me also put a post on hello world. And on IAP, I'm going to have just one get. I'll show you why. Okay, let's go to okay. Now we've defined these routes as it's standardly called routes, but we haven't wired it up to the Lambda function yet. So API gateway is one AWS service. Lambda is another AWS service. But we need to wire the two now. So the wiring is going to happen here. Integration type is Lambda function. We'll keep this as Lambda function. As you can see, you can also do HTTP, mock, and VPC, and some other stuff. Use Lambda proxy integration. This we will say yes, we want to do a Lambda proxy integration. Lambda region AP South 1. So this is the same. AP South 1 is essentially Mumbai. So if your Lambda is in US East, then you have to select that here. Lambda function is Node.js hello world. So this gives you auto suggestions over here. And I'm going to use Node.js hello world. Use default timeout is fine. Click on save. This is add permission. Yes, add permission. That's not a problem. Go ahead. Okay. Okay, I think this is good enough. For post also, we do the same. Use Lambda proxy integration and we call the same Lambda function. We'll save. Okay. Okay, cool. Now there's one final step remaining. Go to actions and say deploy API. Let me show that again. Actions, deploy API. Deployment stage. There's no stage, so you have to create a new stage. Call it whatever, default. Any description, default stage. This is just any description. Deployment description is, this is somewhat like Git. Every time you deploy this API, you kind of have to give a commit message of sorts. So each commit is essentially each deployment in this case. So commit description, deployment description. That's the analogy I want to point out. Deployment description will just say initial deployment. We'll say deploy. No integration behind nothing. One sec, there's something missing here. Okay, this integration is missing. All right. So IAP is missing. Let me delete it for now. I'll add it later. Delete resource. No problem. You can add it later. Deploy API. New stage. Default. Description. Default.
So basically that means whenever we are deploying whichever methods and actions and endpoints that we have created, all of them are getting deployed together, right?
Yeah.
So right now we had created hello world and individually attached get and post to it, and we had the IAP where we had attached only the get. We couldn't selectively choose which one to deploy. We can't say hello world and deploy that, but it was actually deploying the entire thing, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's essentially why it gave an error.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll deploy it, and okay, once you deploy it, you'll get this invoke URL over here, and let me copy this URL and open it on a different tab. So this is your API. This is your live API which you can give to anyone, and anyone anywhere in the world can open this URL, and you have an API running for yourself. Okay, it says missing authentication token, which is not a problem, which we fix very quickly. Go back to API gateway, and you can see slash hello world is what we had defined. Slash, we didn't define anything for slash.
Yep.
That's why it's saying missing authentication token. It should say missing definition or something, but it says missing authentication token. So we'll go to slash hello world. Okay, slash default slash hello world. It gives an error. Let me quickly see why. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's the part and parcel of being a developer, right? So you'll run into errors. You gotta fucking fix those errors.
Yeah. Okay. This error is because there's no.
Okay.
I had missed a single quote over here.
That's why it's important to test after every change, right?
Yeah. Let's quickly see if it works now. Refresh. Hello world. Yep. Okay. So yeah, as you can see, this is an HTTP response, and the response said that the status code for it should be 200, which is essentially HTTP OK.
Yeah.
And the body is supposed to be a JSON string called hello world. And that's essentially what we have got here in the response. So this is how you can wire up an HTTP API with a Lambda. Now let me quickly show you how we can do hello world. We can change hello world to hello Ayush from the HTTP API. So from the HTTP API, what we're going to do is slash hello world ke baad, after slash hello world, we'll do a query string. Okay, we'll say name equal to Ayush, and this should now, instead of saying hello world, this should give out hello Ayush. So right now it won't because I haven't changed the code. But to do that, what we'll do is in the code here, we will say hello plus event dot query string parameters dot name. I'll explain what this is, but let's quickly see if this works. Okay, you can see this works. It says hello Ayush, and if I change the URL to name equal to, let's say, Mayank, it will give out hello Mayank. So what I did here is something very simple. How AWS has configured API gateway to work with Lambda is, when we wire up API gateway with Lambda, the event, which is the input to the Lambda, is given a whole lot of information about the HTTP request. You get information like the path, if it is slash hello world or if it was slash IAP. You get all these query string parameters. You also get all other HTTP headers like client, if it's coming from Firefox, if it's coming from something else, etc. So all the HTTP headers that you can think of, API gateway takes all of those HTTP headers and passes it to the Lambda, and it's passed into this object called event. So inside event, you get a whole bunch of things, out of which query string parameters is one of those things. And here, because I called this name equal to something, you need to write the same thing here. So if I say name1 equal to Mayank, then here also I have to change it to name1. So that's how we can wire up API gateway to work with Lambda and pass in some parameters using query string, using a query string.
Yep.
Now let's do the post, shall we? Because in post we had something else. What did we have in post? Okay, post is also configured to work with the same Lambda. So I don't know about you guys. I think Postman is a good tool to make post requests. But I'll be using curl, and I'll quickly show you the curl request that I'm typing out in my browser. Okay, let me change my screen sharing to Perl. Can you see the terminal now?
Yep.
All right.
Can you zoom, like just increase the screen size or some font? So,
Yeah.
Okay, much better.
All right. So I'll take the URL from here. Yeah. So as you can see, the URL is the same /hello world, but instead of a get, we are doing a post over here, -x post, and in the header we have to say the input is of type JSON. -d says that this JSON is essentially this. So this is the body of the post request, and in the body we are saying name colon Ayush. So what we are doing is now the Lambda is supposed to take this request body, parse it as a JSON, and pick up the name from the JSON, and hello world instead of hello world, use this name to say hello to. So let's all right, there's an error. Okay, so here what we'll have to now do is we'll have to use.
Ayush, we are still on the terminal.
Yeah. Let me change it to Firefox.
Yep.
All right. Okay. So this Lambda function right now, it expects, query string parameters dot name. Okay. But what we will do here now is we'll do something like this. We'll do if this is the strategy we'll use to basically say, okay, API gateway, when you do a get slash hello world, then also this Lambda function is invoked, and when you do a post slash hello world, then also this Lambda function is invoked. But right now, as you can see, this Lambda function is catering only to the get. It's not catering to the post. So the strategy we'll use here is if request type is get, then do something. Else if request type is post, do something else. Okay. So the parameter which comes in event that we'll use is called HTTP method. If event.http method equal to get, then do something else. If event.http method equal to post, do something else. So I had mentioned how API gateway takes all of the information about the API request and passes it to the Lambda as an input, and that input goes into event. So there's a whole bunch of parameters that goes into event. I showed you query string parameters. There's also HTTP method. Then there's also paths. There's a whole bunch of others.
Yep.
Anyway, so this is what was happening before. So I'll simply paste it here. This is the code which we had anyway written for the get wala part. For post, what we'll do is we'll have to do something like we'll have to parse it as a JSON, and the body comes in event.body. If it's not event.body, then it will throw an error and we'll find out. But if I remember correctly, it's event.body. And event.body, this is the name. So let name is equal to json.parse event.body, or let me call it let body is this. So this is the whole body, and then the name is body.name. And in response, we'll do something similar. So I'll do a copy paste here. Instead of event.queryString.parameters.name, we'll say name, because this is the same variable we have defined here. So as you can see, in get we are doing this. We are using query string parameters, but in post we are using the event.body. We're parsing it, picking up the name from there, and hello.name over here. I mean hello name.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if this runs. We'll do save. Alright, now I'm going back to the terminal very quickly. For those of you who are on Postman, you do a similar thing and it will work. Okay, so yeah, as you can see, post request, content type JSON, -d is the body, name Ayush, and this is the URL / hello world, hello Ayush. Now let's change this to hello Mayank. You can expect a similar thing, hello Mayank. Okay, so this works. Now, so the post works, and did we do anything wrong with the get? Did we somehow break it? Let's quickly find that out also. I hope we didn't break the get. Sorry. So this was the get. Yeah, hello Mayank, this still works. So get slash hello world goes to this lambda, post slash hello world also goes to this lambda.
Yeah.
Now, if any of you is wondering, what if we had two different lambda functions for handling the get and the post? Yes, you can do that. You can call one lambda as hello world hyphen get and create another lambda, call it hello world hyphen post. And in API gateway, as you had seen here, instead of mapping it to the same lambda, Node.js, so this is the lambda function here.
Yeah.
So here, Node.js hello world hyphen get or hyphen post, if you had two different lambdas. Which is the better way? I don't know if there's any golden rule for that. It depends on you. If you think one lambda function is becoming too big because of handling get and post and put and all of those things, then you can separate it into three different lambdas. But if you think that it's fine, then you can work with the with one lambda also.
I think that kind of follows a lot of the clean code practices, right? Like if it's getting too big, complex, trying to do too many different things, then sure. Otherwise, keep it in the same place because it's similar overlapping logic just coming in as different types of requests from probably different places.
Correct.
Yeah. Aditya is asking, can't we use just Firefox to send out a post request? I think if you're using any kind of a browser, you can use something like a Postman service, right? Ayush already mentioned that. So if you're not familiar with Postman, just Google for Postman API testing or something. It's a fairly big company and a really good service that every developer should have in order to test any kind of APIs. And you can test pretty much every kind of API through that service.
Yeah. Let me very quickly do the IAP one also. Sorry, we'll create a new resource under slash, which is the root. Create resource, call it IAP. Create resource, that will be slash IAP. We'll do a get on this. Create method get. Yeah, integration type is lambda function. Use proxy. Lambda function is IAP. I think we created IAP. We use that same lambda function. Say save. Add permission. Okay. All right. So this is set up. Now we made a change to this API. So we have to deploy it again. We'll go to actions. We'll say deploy API. Stage is the same. You don't have to create a new stage this time because we created the stage first time. The stage is default. Deployment description is okay. Added slash IAP. It's just any comment. Say deploy. Okay. So now slash hello world. Together with slash hello world, we now have slash IAP. And it obviously gives an error because there's something wrong with the code, which we'll very quickly fix. But you can see that this route has been set up. Let me go to the IAP lambda. And what is wrong here? There's something wrong here, obviously. Yeah. Okay.
I think we need to provide the data, right?
Yeah. So the lambda is expecting the event to have two properties, all items and already purchased. But in the request that we right now made, we are not passing, API gateway is not passing that information as part of the event. API gateway is not doing that. So to do that, what we'll do is, what we can do here is, we can pass it in query string. So question mark, let's say, let's remove all items for now, because it will make the request
query string complex.
It will make it a little big. So that's probably not needed for this. Better to get rid of it for now. Because this is how it was. And so now we are expecting already purchased. So it's question mark already purchased golden apples. So this it's still giving an error. We'll fix it.
I think we
So
didn't
this is,
save it.
yeah, I didn't save it. So here, instead of event dot already purchased, we will now have to do event dot query string parameters dot already purchased, because API gateway passes on the HTTP request information about the query string, and it's available at event dot query string parameter. So if you had another query string parameter called all items, then it will be under event dot query string parameter called all items. So let me save this. Now it should run. Refresh. Yeah, it's giving out the other four. Let me add one more. Golden blade, let's say. Yeah, this works.
Awesome.
Awesome. So let me quickly recap what we did. We created new Lambda functions. We tried one Node.js example. We tried one Python example, and we found two ways to invoke these Lambda functions. One is from the AWS console itself, which is essentially this browser. You create new test events from here, and you click on test. So that's one way to run your Lambda function. But this is typically a way for a developer to keep testing his work while he's developing. And then once you want to make live on an HTTP API URL, you go to API gateway, create a new API, you add your resources, you see your resources here, you add your methods, you wire it up with your lambdas, then you do a deploy API, and within the lambda, you can get your HTTP request information under things like event.queryString parameters, event.http method, and there are some more. Let me very quickly show you what the other ones are. You can see the other ones here. So this is, let's say, body, resource, paths, stage variables, headers. There's a whole bunch of information that API gateway passes to Lambda inside event. So event dot, let's say you want what is request time epoch. So you do event dot request context dot request time epoch, and then similarly all of these other things. So which ones did we see? We saw body, we saw HTTP method, and we saw query string parameters. If you wanted to find out from your Lambda whether it was /hello world or whether it was /IAP, you can look at event.paths.
Yeah.
All right, so I have prepared this much only for the hands-on session, and as an outro, I wanted to I'm gonna stop the screen share now. So as an outro, I wanted to just quickly mention that what more do we have in the serverless ecosystem and stuff. So on the Google Cloud, we have Google Cloud Functions, and on Azure, I think it's called FAS, Function as a Service. So they call it different things, but essentially Google Cloud also provides, Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure, both of them also provide this serverless platform, so you can create your functions on these also. And there's another thing I wanted to point out. There are different frameworks now. So there's a framework called serverless. Serverless is the name of the framework, and in fact, it's become a full-blown company all by itself. It provides a whole bunch of ways, a group of standard techniques to deploy your applications on the serverless platform. So I showed you only two examples, a Hello World and an IAP. But if you want to go ahead and make your own application or a group of APIs. Let's say you're making Twitter, so you'll have slash users, slash tweets, slash whatever messages. You'll have a whole bunch of things. So if you want to run your own app, which is slowly becoming more complex and it's getting bigger and bigger, the way I showed you, you can do it, but you will have to do a lot of the managing all of those Lambda functions. And if you have get, post, and put, it become a whole bunch of Lambda functions. So if you use a framework like serverless, and there's another called Claudia JS. There are some others also.
Yep.
There's a whole bunch of frameworks. What these frameworks help you do is they provide you with another set of proper defaults. They say, okay, fine, you can manage your serverless API in the same way that you used to do it in something like Express or Spring. If you are using Java, then it lets you create the directory structure in the same way, which you're familiar with, and by itself, it handles the creation of those lambdas, the wiring up with API gateway and all of those things. So it does all of the plumbing for you. So that's another layer of serverless on making things easy and giving sensible defaults. They have taken it to the next level altogether. So yeah, if you guys want to try serverless, you can definitely try it. And
there is one question: is AWS Lambda similar to Microsoft Azure PlayFab? PlayFab, actually, you can know. Have you heard of PlayFab, Ayush?
PlayFab?
Yeah.
I know. I haven't.
So it's actually like a gaming specific backend that Microsoft I think they acquired. They didn't build it internally. They acquired an external company. So it's kind of like a hybrid ecosystem where it kind of comes out of the box with a lot of backend server stuff for specifically needed for a lot of gaming oriented applications, right? So user login, authentication, sending friend request, multiplayer services out of the box and all, right? So it's kind of like a modified version of AWS, Lambda specifically catered towards gaming applications. So a fairly good service overall, I think. Um, Joy is asking, AWS is rather a deep topic. Implement and decide which service to use. What would you suggest? How to approach the depth from a learning perspective? Any thoughts?
Suggest how to approach. I think you should just try out all the different services on your own in your free time. I think that will help you know what service does what. There are services like Elastic Beanstalk, there is Lightsail, there is S3.
Yeah.
S3 is something I kind of wanted to cover, but I'll do next time. There is so these are and obviously there's also EC2,
Yep.
which is the
The
bare
default,
bones server that
yeah.
You can use. So what I would suggest is I'm kind of pro serverless, if you ask me. I mean, because I really think it makes life easier for developers, and very quickly, as we've seen today, very quickly you can set up some very simple code and push it to production. You can actually have real clients for your startup in a week.
Yeah.
So serverless by default can be a good option, I would say. I mean, if you're working in a bank, for example, so banks really need applications that need tight security and stuff. So if you are working for a bank and if they want to make you, I mean, if they give you a project where some deep integration with some other services is involved, there I think Lambda might be difficult to get, because not only will it be technically difficult, but it will also be difficult to convince your manager that the right thing to do. But if you're a startup and if you don't really have other big systems to integrate with, then I think Lambda is a very good choice to get started with. And then once you reach a scale where, let's say, you have lots and lots of users, or you have too many components in your use case in your product. In that case, you can consider moving to your own set of servers and handling handling the distribution on your
I
own.
think one thing to note there is like I worked for a bank, right? Like I swear, D Shop is actually a financial institution. There is a lot of legal restrictions as to what you can do with data when you're dealing with trading data and all, right? It's very sensitive information, and whenever there's money involved directly in the data, it becomes highly scrutinized and there's a lot of legality to it. So in that cases, you cannot use AWS. That's just out of question. That's why I told you in the beginning, right? Like there was a freaking server room occupying the space of 250 people, right? Because there are these legalities that you can't offload holding data in third-party providers and all, right? So that's one thing. On specifically the topic of learning itself, right? Like I think it's more about just staying connected with the ecosystem, because even if like when Ayush was showing the opening screen, right? If you look at the list of services, there are freaking so many services, and every I told you about something that launched 2 days back, right? And people who are actively building it might even not know that there are so many services coming out. So it's very hard to just start learning. It's more about staying connected with the ecosystem and figuring out what you need at what point, then diving in and start learning it, right? But you should know, okay, what is EC2, what is Lambda, what is the database equivalent for if I want to set up a dynamically scaling database on a Microsoft platform versus a Windows platform, or versus like Amazon AWS service provider, right? Or Google Cloud. You should just broadly know what is happening in the ecosystem, because it's just not possible in today's day and age to just start and say I'm going to learn from zero all the way up, right? uh, by the time you catch 250, there are 50 more things that that would have been launched during that time, right? So usually it's more about stay connected and keep learning as you need them. Otherwise, you'll be hammered with shit to learn. That's usually the approach I take. Cool, awesome. I think overall pretty good, guys. Any other quick questions before we wrap up? I don't see any other questions in the chat, so hopefully you guys were able to follow along. If there's any follow-up questions, I think I have one question. While we answer that, this is the last call for any other questions in chat, either on YouTube or Zoom. So Ayush, you started off your career in a backend role. Then you moved to a full stack role, right? Then you started doing a little bit of AR, VR, and sort of Unity as well, right? And now you're doing your own startup, right? So what would you recommend, like what has your journey has been? Because a lot of the times what I'm seeing is that young students think that if I'm right now committing to say a full stack role or a backend role or a JavaScript technology stack, I'm freaking stuck for the next 20 years in JavaScript. That's not going to happen practically, right? So your career has seen like 3 to 4 different transitions over the course of your, like, 3 to 4 different job opportunities that you had, and everything came in with something different, right? So what advice would you have in terms of thinking about technology, career opportunities for people who are just entering the workforce now, and especially given COVID, there's so much uncertainty, right? So generally, any advice there for young students?
What I feel is, if you um, if you really have to specialize in one or two things, um, I would say you will know it, because you'll get that feeling. If you keep doing, let's say, JavaScript, you keep doing it, you keep doing it, doing it, then uh, I think it's a good sign that you'll be happy to just keep on doing it. Because if you don't get bored and if you don't feel like you're missing out on other stuff, other languages, other domains, then I think it's a good sign that you'll be fine with just JavaScript or just C++ or just something. But if you do get the feeling that there's a whole bunch of other things that's there, and my friend is doing AI, or my friend is doing AR, VR, and I also want to do it, then I think you should respect that feeling and give it a shot. It's not necessary you like it, but give it a shot. And to give it a shot, you can simply do it in your hobby time. Um, if you like it in your hobby time, you can make a switch. Um, so this is for people who are thinking in terms of technology. This is the technology I want to get into, or this is the language I want to learn, or
Hmm.
there are engineers who don't really worry about the technology per se, but they want to change their domains, for example. So if you enter a bank, so one of my friends, he joined a bank as his first company, but he did not like the fintech. I mean, he did not like the fintech space.
Hmm.
So he wanted to do something else. So he then joined. He then joined a health tech startup, I think, if I remember correctly. And uh, so for people who are thinking from a domain perspective, I want to go from health tech to fintech, or I want to make games. I want to become a systems developer.
Hmm.
So um, those are cases where you don't really worry about which technology you are using or which programming language you are using, and that's also a valid way of looking at things. It's not necessary that you have to figure out what language you want to get into and fixate on it and stuff
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there are advantages to sticking to a particular trajectory, but there are real disadvantages also, because what if it becomes obsolete?
Hmm.
What if something much better just comes in and replaces it altogether? And similarly, it's also not necessary that you have to finalize what domain you want to get into.
Yeah.
You know, get into fintech and then stay in fintech for your life. That's also not necessary. If you don't like domains, you can switch. So I usually see these two ways of looking at things. Either you want to, and then there are also cases where some people decide, okay, I don't want to get into this particular space because this particular space usually uses that programming language.
Hmm.
So that also happens sometimes.
Yeah.
If you really don't want to work on a particular ecosystem, tech ecosystem, and some industry or some company is using only that ecosystem,
Hmm.
then you may choose to say, okay, I don't want to join them, and that's fine. Don't worry about it. It's you're not going to be you're not missing out on anything if you make that kind of a decision.
Hmm.
Um, so, in essence, to summarize, what I would say is, if you don't, uh, if you don't, feel that you're missing out on anything, then there's a good chance that you like what you're already doing,
Yeah.
and stick with it. Uh, don't be uh, don't be afraid that your friends are doing 50 other things and you are doing only one thing. You are doing one thing and you are cracking it. You are doing it really, really well. And on the other hand, if you do get these, if you do feel like, hey, there's this, there's that, I want to do that, I want to do that, then yeah, I mean, don't fixate yourself to one thing and keep experimenting in that case. It's also possible that you may feel very experimental in the first 2 years, and then you may say, okay, now I have found this particular thing, and now I'm going to fixate on this. That's also
Yeah.
that also works.
Yeah.
I've seen people who wanted to try out a whole bunch of things initially, and then they are like, no, now I'm done. 2 years, 3 years, I tried out whatever I wanted. Now I'm going to stick with this. That's also another way of looking at things. And maybe there are people who started off only in one thing, and then 5 years of experience in just one company, and then suddenly they're like, okay, now I'm going to experiment whatever I want.
Hmm.
So one of my friends, joined. He joined fintech, and he worked only on C++, and that's 5-6 years he worked only on C++,
Hmm.
C++, and he graduated the ranks in his company. And then after 6 years, he said, okay, now I'm bored. I want to see what else is going. And then he tried out AR/VR. He tried AI/ML. He tried database technologies. He tried a whole bunch of things.
Hmm.
So it's really up to you. I mean, um, I think staying experimental is
Yeah.
is a suggestion I usually give.
Absolutely. Yeah, same. Like always keep learning, always keep sort of experimenting. I think that's usually the way because you never know where else you might find interest. So you need to keep kind of scratching the edges of the things that you know and kind of keep expanding your world view, right? Like never keep it sort of restricted to a certain set, but keep focused on building something, really solid, but then again, keep scratching the surfaces of the boundaries, and that's how you kind of grow both as a person, as an individual, as an engineer as well, right? So yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool, awesome. So I think overall pretty great session. So thanks again for joining us today, and yeah, hopefully we'll host you again sometime soon as well.
All right.
Awesome. All right. Take care, Ayush. See ya.
Cool, man. Bye.
Bye.